Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results.
Here we go.
Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. And I've got to say, an absolute pleasure to be able to talk to a lady who is also a Melburnian, albeit on the other side of town, based in the Mornington Peninsula. But absolute pleasure to have Ingrid Maynard on the podcast this morning. Ingrid, welcome. How are you?
Lovely to be here, Darren. Thanks so much for having me.
It's no, it's an absolute pleasure. We've been connected on LinkedIn for a while, and I've been following your work. And got to say that it's good to be connected with kindred spirits. And when people look at us in terms of what we do, they might think, "Oh, you guys are competitors because you're in the sales game, you're in the sales leadership game. You're the founder and managing director at The Sales Doctor. You're also an author of a newly released book called The Sales Revolution." But I'd love your thoughts on this. But my take on this, and it came from a guy that I listened to many years ago, was if we talk to people who are in the industry and we share ideas, it actually lifts the entire industry rather than diminish that and minimize that. So I don't see you as a competitor. I don't see anybody that I speak to as a competitor. I see you as a person who can add significant value to the sales community. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh God, I love what you're saying, actually, Darren. And you know, when people like us come together, what we bring to the conversation is an absolute love, first of all, of sales and the profession of selling. But we also love, I find that we love salespeople as well. And
Mm.
for us, sales isn't a dirty word. It's something that we know is an act of service when it's done well. It should be pleasurable. It should be mutually enriching when it's done well. And so we have some pride around it. We have a little bit of enthusiasm and excitement around it. And we probably speak a language that not everyone does.
That's right. Because it's actually funny you should say that, and I love the fact you actually mentioned their service.
Yeah,
And one of my key philosophies is sales is the ultimate form of service.
yeah,
And if you do it well, you'll never be out of employment. You'll never be out of an opportunity. Um, but it's just all about serving and helping others and building up the capability. It's yeah, it's a great thing. And the language you reference is, I often ask this, and I'd love your take on this.
yeah,
I often ask people, salespeople, sales leaders in particular, who absolutely loves being sold to, all right?
yeah.
Because I love to get their response to that. What's
Mm,
your take on that? What do you think when you think of sales?
mm.
What's your first thing that comes up to mind? But also, do you love being sold to?
Yeah, exactly. I tell you what, okay, I've got a few answers to that question. You'll be sorry you asked, Aaron. So yeah, my first response when you said that, who loves selling? And put your hands up, who loves selling? You find the hands all go down,
That's right.
straight away, because of the association with it. And it comes back to what you just said there, is that not many people like to be sold to. It's not a very pleasant experience because it insinuates that it's that whole association with selling being a dirty word, like I said before, which is where we show up in a space and someone is acting in a way that we kind of go, who are you talking to? Are you talking to me? Because
Yeah.
I don't really feel like this is a conversation, and I feel like you're corralling me into a corner that I'm going to be, like that cat on Pepe Le Pew, trying to get away from them, as opposed to people love to buy.
Mm,
The situation is beautifully curated and crafted. So for me personally, I think I'm the easiest person to sell to in a way if it's done well, because I really enjoy the process. I love watching someone, who loves what they do, and being a customer in that situation. I actually get a lot of pleasure out of it. It's rare though. It's
mm,
it's really rare, but when it does happen, gee, it's a beautiful thing. And so one of the things that we look at in my programs is really about curating the experience and facilitating the direction of thinking so
Mm,
that you can lead people to different conclusions and so that they realize for themselves what they want to do. Because when they sense that they're in control, when there's autonomy in a conversation, that's where people feel safe and
mm.
they're more able to make the right decision for them.
Yeah. Ingrid, there is so much in that I want to delve into. There's so many questions I wanted to get into. Before we do that, it would be remiss of me to ask, and certainly on behalf of the listeners, a little bit about your background and what led you to creating the Sales Doctor, albeit it's about 12, 13 years ago now.
Yeah.
It goes really quickly. I mean, I'm just reflecting on my own journey, and it's been 10 years since I left corporate. And I was, yeah, it's just gone like that. So I'm sure it's gone quickly for you as well.
Is it the
Um,
best move you've ever made, Darren?
yes, it is. Unequivocally, yes.
Good.
Has it meant that it's been up and down? Absolutely. But everything happens for a reason, and it's about, and we hear John Maxwell talk about this. We hear, Tony Robbins talk about this. That success is all about the journey. It's not about the destination, and it's true. Albeit sometimes when you're going through the dark times, it's like, geez, it'd be good if I just had that job and I can go back and do that thing. But you get up the next day and you keep going and you keep being of service. So, yeah, never regretted it. But from your perspective, where did this all start for you? And was it an evolution that led you to create the Sales Doctor, or was it something specific that happened that was the catalyst for you?
Oh, so I started my sales journey, I think, when I was still at uni, and I was studying primary teaching of all things, and then I wanted to work for the Body Shop so badly, and this was the 90s when the Body Shop was in its heyday, and I was just so just I manifested it pretty much.
Hmm.
And a body shop opened up in my local town, and I applied for a Christmas casual position. And I knew so much about the body shop because I was obsessed with it from the age of 12 that, I kind of was a bit of a shoe-in for the Christmas casual role. And, but I found myself either in a selling situation, and in retail, it's direct, it's
Yeah.
straight away, it's immediate. Um, and finding myself quite shy and thinking, oh gosh, I love the company, but I'm really nervous about talking to customers. And then over time, because I was just so keen, I worked whenever they asked me and all of those sorts of things. Eventually, I had this wonderful sales manager or, store manager, and her name was Angela Bontempo. I don't know if she would ever listen to this. I don't know even where she is today, but she was instrumental in my career in that she was the first person who introduced me to the concept of love and putting love into the store, into every corner of the store, into every conversation that I had with customers. And once I understood that, then it became a lot easier for me to just, I don't have to talk. I can just listen,
Hmm.
and I can really listen for what they're saying and what they're not saying. And then based on what I've gleaned from them is most important to them, then I can direct them to different elements in the store. And then that fostered in me a bit of a love of selling. And then when I graduated, I really didn't want to do teaching, and they were closing down schools at the time. So it was really hard to get a job as a teacher, but I kind of given up the ghost. But I wanted to
Hmm.
finish my career, and I approached P&C, People and Culture at the Body Shop, and they said, "Well, there's lots of teachers here who are in training," and I was so honestly, what a yokel. I went, "What's training?" And they said, well, it's like teaching, but you could train about selling, you could train about products. And I was like, oh my God, are you serious? So I could actually use my degree to do something that I love. And they were like, well, yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, so there was a training admin role that came up. I was the world's worst training administrator. It is not my strength, as most salespeople will relate to. Um, but I did it, and then I did all of the training programs that no one else wanted. And then I had this incredible leader. My career's been, gifted by some incredible leaders, and she gave me a national role for the product group that I was most passionate about, which was was called Colorings back then, which was our makeup range. And what I developed was a nationwide store network of what I called key contacts. Now that was already in place, but when I took that role, I brought them in as a mini sales force, and I taught them how to maximize their conversion rates, their average sale, and how to do that really quickly. And so sales went through the roof. And in those days, this is before, I mean, this is in the days of faxes, before internet, before email. I think email might have come in towards the end of my time there. But I used to get them to fax in their results every week. And so we'd look at makeovers, we'd look at, product category sales, and they had to fill that out manually, and they were happy to do it because what I did we had this internal magazine called Jamaga, and that would go out in hard copy in the mailbag to all of the stores, and they would look for their name and see where they were on the leader tally in terms of sales and average sale. And I'd shout out people and I'd congratulate them. And people wanted to be recognized. People wanted to be celebrated. It was fun. So
Mm,
I had people lining up for my programs because they were interesting, they were relevant to, fashion, the target market that we were after, and I was young, they were young, so it was all really fun. And then there was an opportunity to go to Body Shop International in the same division, so in colorings. But anyway, someone put it on my desk, and this is a friend who's still a dear friend today, and he's another person who's been instrumental in my career. And he said, you should go for that. And it was a market sales manager role, and the markets for Australia and Canada. And I said, oh, I can't do that. And he said, yes, you can. And I said, well, no, I can't. And he said, yes, you can. He said, instead of stores, you've got country. It's the same.
mm,
You
mm.
just got to. I was like, oh my
Keep
God,
us going.
I got the job. The job, can you believe it? So I moved to the UK, did that for a year, probably mucked around a little bit more than I should have. And then they were getting it ready for sale to L'Oreal. So that was kind of the end of my 8-year body shop
Yeah,
career. And then I went into other roles. I worked for the Australian Retailers Association, selling and delivering the training. Then I worked for an IT company, and then I started on my own. And that was really off the back of necessity. And my first business was called Harvest. But before it was called Harvest, what I was actually doing was creating leads, generating first appointments for my clients. But it was just a job to start with. But
yeah,
because I was good at it, she started to recommend me to other people. I thought, I think there's a business in this. What will I call it? I'll call it Harvest. And at that time, it was pretty awful in my personal life. So I exited, stage left, and and I started from scratch. So I moved back in. You always know your life's going well, Darren, when you
yeah.
move back home as an adult.
Shit, wait.
And I did that carrying passengers this time with my son. But her bed was my desk. I
Yeah,
hired everything, had no money to my name, and just backed myself. And so I created Harvest. I got all of these women working for me, taught them how I did it. And so we went to market, and that became incredibly successful. I think I had 1 year where I made a loss, and that was around the GFC sort of time period. But the biggest mistake that I made in that business was not taking a break, and I completely burnt out, and I had
mm,
zero energy left. So when that finished, I thought, what do I want to do? And I went back to my first love of sales training and coaching, created the Sales Doctor, and pretty much started again. And it reinvigorated me. It was and always has been the love of my life, besides my beautiful husband, but the love of my life.
yeah.
And yeah, so that's where I found myself again.
Wow, what a story. And there's a theme as you were talking through that. You mention it as a teenager working in the body shop, and you mentioned the word love.
Yes.
Now, not often people consider love and sales in the same sort of sentence, let alone the same stratosphere. But what you went on to talk about in that was love in terms of loving the people, loving the environment, loving the product, but not over, I guess, um, over loving to the point where you're forcing the product onto the customer.
Yeah,
But you also mentioned a very important thing, I think, that a lot of salespeople neglect or not trained to do, and that is to shut up and listen and
right.
be really curious to say, well, what is it that they're looking for? What is it that they have as a challenge or a problem?
Yeah,
And only then will I point them in the right direction because it now puts them in control of the buying process rather than me in control of the selling process.
yeah.
Um, is
It's a game
it,
changer, Darren, isn't it?
yeah, and but it's so fundamental, but it's so powerful. I love your, is that like a philosophy you've taken right throughout and what you bring to to your clients today in terms of the work you do?
Yeah, very much so. And even on the front cover of my book, you'll see in the word revolution, I've highlighted the word love backwards because it's fundamental. And I talk about creating magnetic organizations, which is value delivered multiplied by love. And I think that the world's ready to actually talk about love when it comes to business. Because when we talk about love, you're absolutely right. It isn't about smothering somebody. You know, when we show up with and being able to have, another way of saying love is having unconditional positive regard for somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's agnostic to their personality or liking. It's
Mm,
about showing up to be there, to receive what really matters to them so that you can do whatever you can that's in your control and in your power, in your wheelhouse
yeah.
to make their lives a little bit better. And sometimes that will be about your product or service, but sometimes it will be adjacent to that. It might be an introduction to somebody else. It might be offering a piece of advice. It might be taking a step back until they're ready and perhaps, suggesting that they put certain things in place
Mm,
until such a time as they're ready. And you can have hard conversations when you show up from that place. And I've just found that it's fundamental. One of the women that I work with, she approached me during COVID, and I'm still working with her today. And she's been instrumental in changing the nature of my business. Her name is Stacey Packer, and I love her. I love her. Um, but she approached me and she said to me, "Oh, the thing that stood out to me was on your website, you had the word love." And she's reading my own
yeah.
website back to me, and I'm like, "Did I say that?" I can't remember. But so she said it back then, and I thought, "Oh," and I was a little bit, "Oh God, have I said that?" Almost like it was a faux pas
Mm,
because even and I am a loving person, but even I was a little bit shy of using that word back then. But I'm absolutely loud and proud now.
brilliant. I love it. I love it. In fact, full disclosure, I often use the word love in my workshops, particularly when I'm working with leaders.
Yeah.
Um, because if you don't love your people, if you don't love your customers, it's very difficult to have, I guess, the candor that's required to lead them appropriately and have those conversations because it's rooted in care.
Wow. I love that you say love.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's almost uncorporate because I do
Yes.
it sometimes as a bit of a pattern interrupt because I know that having been in corporate myself for 20 plus years, you start to drink the Kool-Aid, you start to get conditioned,
Yeah.
you start to not use certain vernacular but then take on other vernacular,
Yeah.
and you think, you know what, if I'm going to get cut through here, maybe what I've got to do is shake the tree a little bit, and I'm just going to throw in some words that might be, outside of their comfort zone or outside of their current, I guess, sphere of reference, and think, you know what, just see what happens. Because I'm really comfortable now with having gone through everything I've gone through. Hey, I'll hug, and in fact, I said this story yesterday. I had a client in and he may not be listening to this, but if you do, shout out Nick. Love your work, mate. I did at a conference for one of my clients, and at the end of when I did the keynote, he was doing the bit of a thanks very much, and on stage he gave me a big hug. Right, and I'm thinking,
Oh,
oh my God, and I never expected that, but it was just a great indication to say, you know what, particularly for men, we're
Yes.
breaking down the barriers and saying it's okay to hug somebody, it's okay to say I love you, it's okay to say I care, and it just means that there's a level of vulnerability there that you and it's a strength.
I really agree with that. And when you think about how much time we spend in our working lives, if we're not bringing our whole selves to that situation, whether that be with our customers or with our colleagues or with our direct reports or with our leaders or with other, people in the business ecosystem, we're robbing everyone of that deeper connection. And when we find those, I call it, energetic resonance. But when
Mm.
there's an energetic resonance between two people, amazing things happen. It's almost alchemistic.
Yeah.
And you can't necessarily, process drive some of that, although, we can try. But they're qualities that I think people need to feel okay enough in
Mm.
that culture to be able to bring their whole selves to work.
Absolutely. And it means that if we do, because I often refer to John Maxwell, who's one of my, I mean, I just love the work that he does. And he always talks about the three questions that people are asking of their leader. And the first one is, does my leader care about me?
Mm,
Genuinely care about me as a person, not just as a resource or as a mechanism to get the result? Can
yes.
they then help me? Which help is not necessarily doing things for them, but can they open doors? Can they give me feedback? Can they introduce me to people that perhaps I haven't been able to get access to? And then the third question is, can I trust them? Right? Can I trust my leader? But the first question there is, do you care about me? Is a really powerful one because certainly in sales and particularly corporate business sales, it can be very much well, perception is dog eat dog. Let's go sell product. We're under pressure to hit a number. If you don't hit your number, the bottom 10% is going to be wiped out and we're going to do the turnover, etc., etc. But
Yes.
all of a sudden, if you've got an ecosystem which is based on care, which high performance standards is associated with, you've got a higher level of engagement, a higher level of probably fulfillment from salespeople, and therefore a high level of discretionary effort, which is it's I'd love your take on this because I think the care factor is actually a superpower that many organizations are either choosing not to look at or are just focused on the product and selling their product or their service and increasing their market share.
It's
What are your
100%.
thoughts on that?
Oh, well, you see it everywhere at the moment, Darren. I mean, we're in a market at the moment that's very tight. People have got less discretionary spend. A lot of those war chests were spent during COVID. And so, there's less money around, going around. And so the buying decision has a lot more risk attached to it, whether that's perceived or real. It's real enough to them, right?
Mm,
So the risk for them is if I spend this money and it doesn't work, I can't get that money back.
yeah.
So if our salespeople are going out there with only product and price as in their toolkit, they're going to wind up really missing the mark because they'll end up discounting because they'll think that everything is about price. And as long as I've got
Mm,
the cheapest price, I'll be able to get the deal across. And it's absolutely not that. For a lot of these businesses, they need to have value demonstrated to them. So they need to see that whatever the product or service is going to benefit my business, my team, me personally, not just now, but in months to come. It's going to enable me to do more than I could had I not bought that product or service. And that needs to be demonstrated to me as a buyer. I need to feel, see, understand, and then be able to articulate for myself
mm,
what that measure of value is actually going to generate for me. And then if it's worth if the outcome I can see is worth paying that price, it becomes a no-brainer to me. And what I'm finding is that our salespeople, unfortunately, because and it's not necessarily their fault. They've come through, we've got, maybe 25 years of positive economic conditions, which create a bit of a malaise in
mm,
the way that people sell. So they become a bit flabby. And, when everything's good, in spite of how they show up and they're still hitting targets, everything's tickety-boo. No one looks under the hood and
yeah.
looks at what's coming around the corner, or what might not be there in future, or what might not be at risk. And so they don't develop that deeper level of skill. And when you present any challenge into a market, you need that deeper level of skill. And so we've got a skills shortage, and we've got a training deficit. And so, and you would know this, Darren, because
Mm,
it's your space as well. When you come in to teach people how to sell, it really starts with some of those fundamental skill sets
mm,
and qualities about how to show up for somebody else in a way
yeah.
that has nothing to do with the product or price. And trying to get them to make that connection is the first hurdle to get over. But once they make that connection and they understand that there's inherent value in themselves and in the offer, and then how to have the language of that conversation to show up in a loving way and create value, that they're able to have better commercial relationships
Mm.
that are long lasting and that go deeper than what they otherwise would be able to do.
It's a powerful concept because it means that it brings to life this concept that people do business with those who they know, they like, they trust, and who they remember. And
Yeah.
so if you lead with the memorability or rememberability, then it doesn't really, and we've seen this with a lot of salespeople who move around from company to company, sometimes industry to industry, and their connections move with them. So whatever product or service they're representing, the customers have built those great deep relationships with are going to be more open to at least considering those solutions because of the person that I guess has that high level of trust.
Yeah, you're spot on.
It's so fascinating, and I recently went into a client where we were teaching them. It was a sales excellence day, and at the end of the day, one of the head of the learning and development said, what do you think about the caliber or the quality of the salespeople, right? In terms of a rating. And we just had a conversation, and he turned around to me and said, you know what? Through this day, what I've realized is all the stuff you've spoken about.
Mm,
What I've realized is perhaps the quality of our salespeople were not at the level that we thought they were.
mm,
Because a lot of the, I guess, the training and all the marketing was geared around the product or the service, and they had not intentionally neglected the soft skills, but we didn't get the fundamental foundations in place first, and that meant that they weren't probably up to it. And when they were challenged, they didn't know how to handle it as effectively.
You mentioned marketing there, Darren, and I think that that's another contributing factor to the shallow skill set that today's salespeople are left with. And I say left with because we need to build those skills. They're not born. Salespeople
Mm,
aren't born. They can be created. But um, I think marketing in the 90s, when marketing kind of came into flavor, it was a very sexy career. It was a very sexy function in a business, and it was meant to create demand and
yeah.
educate our customers. And so out of that emerged two different types of salespeople, because the thinking was, as long as marketing creates demand, then really all our salespeople need to do is to show up and take the order.
Mm,
We're left with order takers and glorified customer service agents instead of commercial account managers who see that account management is far more. It's an active sales process. It isn't showing up and keeping the customer happy and just keeping the customer. It's not just about retention. It's about having the right strategy long term with our existing customers to realize any potential for growth,
yeah.
and also if there's nothing more to get, we need to protect and fortify those customers against competitors, and
Mm,
we need a proactive strategy around that too.
mm,
So I agree with you with marketing and with sales, being order takers. They don't come with that next level of commercial acumen. I mean, I talk about in my book, I talk about having a culture of customer, and that's the intersection between having a customer consciousness, which is everyone in an organization really understanding that they have a customer and that they are a customer,
Yeah.
and that every customer carries an equation in their head, which is the value equation. Value
Yes.
equals benefits minus costs.
Yeah.
In their head, everyone's kind of calculating, is there more benefit in this situation for me or less? Is it costing me more than it's benefiting me? Whether or not they realize that, whether or not that's conscious or subconscious, that's what they carry in their heads. And unless we make that connection and see ourselves within that and being able to help them to understand the measurable value that anyone in the organization through their service
Mm.
is able to create, we're going to fall short, which is why I created the sales revolution. Because as much as I love salespeople and selling, it's just not enough today.
Yeah. So, and with that, because I hear a lot of companies talking about the fact that we put the customer at the center of everything we do. We are a customer-centric organization. And you don't have to spend a huge amount of time, and you would know this, a huge amount of time within the bowels of an organization to realize, well, that's a fantastic catchphrase, but it may not necessarily be reality when it comes to it.
Right.
So it's the recognition, if you like, that you just talked about, that every single person within the organization is a customer, and every impact that I have can either create an impression of increase or an impression of decrease in that,
Yes.
right? Which, because sales is not a linear thing, and sales is not necessarily a transactional thing. It's a process that happens over time based on a level of credibility that hopefully the problem will be solved, a solution is created to solve the problem, and everybody's happy and we move on. But it also doesn't stop there because it has to happen. Well, what's the sale after the sale? And I often say to sales teams, hey, the sale doesn't start until after the first or second or sometimes the third sale is made, because you're now going to be tested. So don't think you've done it. Don't think you've got your customer loyalty. You've got to continue to earn that. When you talk about sales is not enough, and when people hear that, how do you qualify that, right? Because they might say, you know what, we've got a great marketing team, we've got a great marketing budget, we've got a great product, we've got a great service, we've got a high market share, we're doing okay. And then we come in and say, well, you know what, SaaS is not enough. What do you find that is missing? Is it the fact that not every organization has people in there understanding that every single person is a customer, or is it the fact that not everybody in the organization also recognizes or should recognize that they are in fact a salesperson?
Okay, so I want to make a couple of distinctions because as soon as you say that, I was on a podcast with a fantastic man like us in our space from Canada called Ian Selby, and he's an absolute legend. And he was saying, if you're at a party, and people ask you what you do, just tell them you're in sales
Yeah.
and watch them, walk away with the moonwalk. Because, and so if I said, everyone's a salesperson in a company, people would start checking their phones and checking out because the association with it is just so poor.
Yeah.
What I would say instead is that let me take you back to a story. So before I wrote the book, and it was the inspiration, it was actually the person I wrote the book to. His name, well, let's call him Dave.
G'day, Dave. Hope
Uh,
you're listening,
and
Dave.
yeah, and I rang him and I just said, how's it all going? And he said, yeah, good. Actually, really good. We're hitting targets, and it's really hard at the moment, but our team's still doing it. And this is a man who's a seasoned campaigner. He's run international divisions, he's run national divisions, he's run regional divisions. He's been in the sales leadership space for a really long time. He knows how it works. He knows how to get a result. He knows how to work with people, bring out their best. He's ace.
Yeah.
That said, he said to me, so, it sounds like we haven't got a problem, right? And I said, okay, but I'm hearing that there's a but here. And he said, yeah. He said, in spite of that, we've now got a situation where we've been the main player in our market. We've dominated the space for 20 years.
Mm.
And there's been other players, but we always knew we had the superior product, which was why we could charge the superior pricing. And our customers, if we let them down, had nowhere else to go. Well, now our products are competing with Chinese products, and those
Yeah.
Chinese products are actually equal, sometimes better than.
Yeah.
Pricing's about the same, and their service level is better,
Yeah.
and they can get product faster. And they had a lag time in their product delivery to market. So salespeople weren't doing the what people blame salespeople for, which is over-promising and under-delivering. They're actually, very, very much setting realistic expectations of
Sure.
turnaround. And the turnaround expectation, because it was coming from overseas, was about 6 weeks. And there's a big industrial cleaning equipment company. And these sales timelines were blowing out to 12 weeks. So they were in effect doubling. Now, every time sales would build insight internally and say, okay, now we're going to meet with this customer. I need to have an ETA on when,
Hmm.
because I can set expectations. I know how to do that. They trust me. We've got a great relationship. Tell me, no, 6 weeks. Tell them six
Yeah.
weeks. It's going to be fine. Are you sure? Yes. Are you really sure? Yes. They
Yes.
go out and consistently that wasn't happening. And then they were breaking down. And then there was a whole host of things that were happening post sale.
Yeah.
Because the customer had such a great relationship with the salesperson, that was the person that they'd come to first. And they'd say, hey, this is not happening. We haven't received that. We've received it wrong. It's broken. It's not this. It's breaking down.
Yeah.
No, what's the company going to do about it? And over time, what happens for a salesperson is they lose belief in what it is that they're taking to market.
Mm.
They make the decision that I am no longer going to sacrifice my hard fought for and hard won customer relationships. I'm not doing it. And I'm not jeopardizing that trust, and I'm not jeopardizing my own reputation with this offer, because nothing's changing. I'm bringing back feedback, but
Yeah.
nothing's changing further along the value chain.
Yeah.
And it struck me that this was a phenomenon that I was seeing across the board. So it might not be, delivery, it might or distribution, it might be
Mm.
finance, where
Mm.
we've won a customer, they come on board, they go to the accounts team to get credit, and they're treated like they're applying for a mortgage, and all of a sudden there's a disconnect between that initial experience. Or it might be in another part of the business, but somewhere else in the value chain, there's a chink in the armor,
Yeah.
and it comes back to bite sales. And what does the business do? They come back to sales and they go, we lost that customer. And sales is like, yeah, you know, no surprise. I mean, we've been saying this. So what I realized was that until everyone in the organization actually understood, not necessarily that they were in sales, but
Mm.
that they definitely have customers, whether they be directly or indirectly. They're either in service of someone who's directly
Yeah.
servicing a customer, or indirectly, servicing a customer, or they've got an internal customer that they need
Yeah.
to deliver value to. And that's where a lot of the hidden opportunity that I like to say help them unlock actually lies. But
Mm.
it comes back to what I say is a customer consciousness. And then they need to have commercial competence if we're going to have that culture of customer, because they need to be able to have commercial conversations that talk about delivery, measurable delivery of value across financial, functional, and emotional value. And until they can have that type of conversation and really understand
Mm.
how my role delivers that for each of my customers and what matters most to them, then we're kind of missing the boat. But when you get that, you create a force that's so magnetic that people want to be around that. They
Yeah.
know that they're getting value delivered to them consistently. They understand the measure of value, and that's compelling.
It also means that from a customer's perspective, when they're interacting with any part of the, I guess, the supplier organization, they get a very consistent message, right?
Yes.
So there's no finger pointing. There's no, sorry, you're gonna have to talk to Cheryl in accounts payable. That's not my
Yeah.
role.
Can
Oh,
you
you
help
have to go back to
yourself?
your, or go back to the salesperson. And that becomes almost a superpower and a differentiator because we're thinking about, particularly in a highly competitive marketplace, it's not going to be the price. It is not going to be your features and benefit. It is going to be often the customer experience that you can deliver post the sale. That will be the difference between a customer staying with you or looking for an alternative.
You're spot on, Darren. I love how you said that about and I know you know this stuff, but post the sale, um, I talk to my people about having the value delivered conversation where we unpack value after the solution or the product's been in place, because we make assumptions that our customers, they get the value because
Mm,
they're using it, right? But actually, no. Once they've got the product or the service in place, they just use it. They don't give it another thought. They don't
yeah.
stop and reflect and go, "Man, I am so lucky that I've got this." So we need to have those conversations to help them understand, what the value delivered actually is, to the degree that we're able to get them, the customer, internal or external, to articulate that measure of value. And that requires a deeper level of skill where they can direct thinking, they can navigate the conversation to draw a conclusion from the
Mm,
customer themselves. Because when the customer is able to speak that value, it reinforces that to themselves. They're further connected to that belief,
yeah.
and it becomes real for them. And sometimes it's unexpected for us. Sometimes we think that the value of the product or service that we deliver is something, when actually, when a customer tells us, it can go in a completely different direction. We're thinking, wow, I didn't know that. And the value of that, Darren, is that we then start to build these client success stories that we can use with other customers as well. And that helps us to build trust, build credibility, build relationships.
Yeah.
People see themselves in other customer situations and go, oh, right, so you did that. Oh, okay, so maybe that can be me too. I can see the end. I can understand why,
Correct.
why we would work together.
Correct. And it's the classic example, Ingrid, of doing a like a what we used to call a win review, right? Because we do loss reviews when we lose a tender or we have business taken away from us. We do the forensic investigation, but it's fascinating how many organizations I ask the question of, when's the last time you did a strategic win review to actually figure out why your key customers do business with you and continue to do business with you?
Yes.
So it's because the relationship. It's because, well, how do you know? Have you verified that? Have you challenged that? Have you investigated that? Because what you're talking about is gathering some customer specific information and data that could well be a key pillar to your market differentiation strategy
Right.
to remain relevant in the marketplace in a highly competitive environment.
That's right.
And we
Yeah.
don't do it.
No. And I think that it's not just salespeople who are scared to have the value delivered conversation. I think it's anyone, because the fear is, what if I haven't delivered any value? Ah, you know, but the truth is, whether we have or whether we haven't, or we've delivered some but not enough, or whatever the reality is, it's real anyway. And
Yeah.
unless we have that conversation, and unless we get the customer telling us what matters most to them and the difference that it's made, getting to a measure of that difference, be it financial, functional,
Mm,
or emotional, um, we don't have the opportunity to make it even better, to your
yeah.
point, or to fix it if
Yeah.
it's not the way that they expected, or not the way that they hoped it might.
Mm. It's just like as we're talking, it's like this is common sense. And I often say to sales teams, hey, this is not rocket science. It's actually harder than rocket science because at least rocket science is specific based on formulas. It's based
Yes.
on like evidence. This is we're dealing with human beings, and human beings are predictably unpredictable. So it's not an exact science. Um, I'd love to ask you about your take on these businesses, particularly with leaders who have been around for a while.
Yeah.
who have been used to drinking the Kool-Aid of the organization
Yes.
and who, because I know that you're very big on customer interactions, the power of human connection, and being visible from a leadership point of view.
Yeah.
The organizations where their sales leaders and their executive leaders managed by absence or managed by sitting in the Oval Office, navel gazing and doing spreadsheets and managing expectations above,
Yes.
versus being, I guess, the catalyst for further pushing forward the human connections with customers. What are you seeing a change in that, or is it still a challenge for a lot of organizations that you
Yeah.
think?
Well, I think it's there's always a a range. Like you would know that too, Darren. But I think when sales leaders managed by dashboard or managed by CRM, um, and they never go out in field with their teams, they miss so much. So, for example, you and I both know, and anyone listening here, especially sales leaders who are listening, who've been around the block a few times, know that there are people in their teams that have the most magnificent looking CRMs, but they might be full of rubbish and they just know how to gamify it, right? So it looks like their pipeline's nice and healthy, that they've got all of these deals here. They've fulfilled the pipeline value expectation. And then you've got the other person who, is the bane of every sales leader's existence because, they're always behind on their admin. They need to, complete their CRM, but they're actually smashing it with results. And, and then there's that tension between.
Yeah.
So what I liken this situation to is like any kind of sports coach who only ever meets one-on-one with their players, maybe sits in a training session on a Tuesday and a Thursday, a training session and watches them do drills, but never sees a game. It is, I mean, it's unthinkable. You'd never
Mm.
do that if you're a sporting coach because the whole purpose of doing those things is the game itself.
Yeah.
And I just don't see sales as being any different. It's an action game, it's an action sport. And so we need our sales leaders, and I don't care how senior they are, to go out from time to time, two up visits with their salespeople and have a different conversation.
Mm.
So they might be saying something like, okay, who are we going out to see today? All right, and what's the outcome for this conversation? All right. And what's your plan to achieve that
Mm.
outcome? All right. So what question? Okay. So if you ask those questions, are you going to achieve that outcome? Great.
Mm.
Observe. Shut up. Don't say anything in the meeting. Don't dive in and rescue. We all know sales leaders who do that and go, out of the way. It's
Let
my
me take care of this.
time. Yeah.
That's
And
right.
it's not like, just put your ego in your pocket and just allow that person to fail if they have to, or allow them to shine. And then afterwards, unpack it. Okay, did you achieve your intended
Mm.
outcome? What makes you say that? If they didn't, okay, where did it fall down? What can you do to fix it? What have you learned from that? Or if they did, what makes you say that? What do you need to do now to build on that? What do you need to do next? What's the next right thing to do?
Mm.
And helping them to see. I mean, I was in a conversation earlier this morning with somebody, and we were talking about a CEO of a business, quite a large enterprise business, who has very high expectations of the sales team. And yet I don't know if this person's ever worked a day in her life in the lives of these people who are really getting in their cars all day long and going from business to business to business to create opportunity, to build opportunity, to rectify staff, to
Yeah.
grow a relationship, to grow their network within those businesses. And without that reality check, it's easy to operate in a vacuum
Mm.
with a complete disconnect to what the market's actually saying, the challenges that their sales team are having, and then having the wherewithal to say, okay, what are the things that I can take away to make it easier
Yeah.
for people to generate the revenue that this business so sorely needs?
It's oh but I'm sitting in the C-suite, Ingrid. I'm in the corner office. I've got my own personalized car spot.
Yes.
I've got a real plant, not a rubber plant, in my office. Um, I have the title. I can't be fraternizing with salespeople. I just give instructions.
Mm.
It's a bit of a generalization. It's a bit of a tongue in cheek. But the reality is, if you have senior executives that are invested in the business, and if they know that they're there to serve their team are not there to serve them,
Yes.
then it may well be they'll get a good indication as to what are some of the bottlenecks and what are some of the challenges, because with their positional power, if you like, they're probably more well placed to make some changes internally to make it easier for our salespeople to do the things they do so that we can actually fill the bucket with all the loot that we want.
That's exactly right. I mean, revenue is great. We need revenue. I mean, without sales, you don't have a business. It's
Mm,
that simple. But what happens when that money comes in? Where are the holes in that bucket? And how do I help our
yeah.
team to maximize their hard work of bringing that in the first place so that it doesn't leak out,
Mm,
somewhere else in the value chain as well. And my role, if I'm in the executive leadership team and I'm a chief revenue officer or I'm sales director, I really, or I'm a COO, I really need to make sure that I'm also working collaboratively with my peers at my level in order to have a more holistic understanding of what the scope really is, what the business's priorities are, and then navigate that world with the commercial realities that
mm.
the sales team's facing at the sharp end. I mean, it's not for the faint-hearted, but it can be an absolutely delicious role if somebody really had the appetite to go that little bit further and really kind of balance things out.
And you said it so well. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's not for everybody. But
Um,
what you need to go into a role like sales leadership or senior sales leadership, sales director, CROs with your eyes wide open, because you'll be playing a completely different political game, particularly when you're up against people who perhaps have taken that old mantra of, hey, the sales team are not selling, get rid of them, blah blah blah, versus,
yeah.
hang on, we need to, and you talk about this in your book about it's the concept of we, not the concept of I. So how do we have a focus on a customer, and how can we understand the impact that we can have even by the internal conversations and the internal processes, because they will always play out in the external environment. So we've got to get our own house in order, and that takes leadership and it takes courage. Because
Yes.
when you've got circumstances or market conditions that says, hey, it's tough, we're not necessarily bringing in the top line revenue or the bottom line profitability that we have in the last few years, it means we've got to do something different. And if
Yes.
we keep doing the same thing, expecting the same results, and as Albert Einstein said, that's just insane. So you got to change. So if you're looking forward, I know we're sort of running out of time now, but if you're looking forward into 2020, the rest of 2025 and beyond,
Yeah.
what do you see as maybe one of the biggest challenges facing sales organizations? But on the flip side, one of the biggest opportunities in
I
sales?
think there's heaps of opportunity. I mean, not, you, we're in that space. That's just the way that we think. Of course, there's great opportunities. But I'm not going to diminish the challenges either. I don't see that the economy is going to get any easier for businesses over the next 12, perhaps even to 24 months. I'm sorry to say that, but that's just my sense of where things are going.
Yeah.
So what that means is that our salespeople and our sales leaders also need to have deeper skills. And sales leadership, as you know, I mean, this is your space,
Mm,
they're often brought up from the sales team and hopped into a sales leadership role because they've been the best salesperson. So you lose a great salesperson, you get a pretty ordinary leader, and then they're expected to deliver results for their team. So I think one of the opportunities is to invest in their sales leaders,
mm,
number one, and give them a deeper skill set so that they can lead, manage, and coach their people in an enriched way so that they can navigate that tight market. But the other thing that I would also urge businesses and sales leaders to embrace is AI, because AI can do some of the heavy lifting
yeah.
when we're at a skills shortage and when we're looking across where are the efficiencies, where can AI actually supplement that outstanding salesperson who's terrible at quote unquote admin? How can I use AI to fill in the gaps so that I can enable them to have better face-to-face conversations? AI is not there to do the selling, but it is
Yeah.
there to do a lot of the heavy lifting in certain parts of the sales process to really enable us. And then what I can get as a sales leader as well, I can maybe go into my pipeline and really get more insight so that I'm having richer conversations with my sales team as well.
Mm,
So I think it's going to get harder, which means that we need to look for efficiencies as businesses so that we're not adding cost. But I think we also need to bring out the best in the people that we've got. So make more for
mm.
the resources we've got, and then explore how AI in particular can really add some productivity gains for us.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Um, if there was one lasting piece of advice
Oh,
for a salesperson, a sales leader, or an aspiring sales leader looking forward, based on everything we've spoken about, that you'd like to leave them with, apart from the fact getting a copy of your book, which we'll talk about in a second,
okay.
what would that piece of advice be for you, from you?
To a sales leader,
Yeah, or to
yeah.
an aspiring sales leader.
Would be back yourself, number one. And it would be what I mean by back yourself is invest in your own professional development because sales leadership is a unique skill. So
Mm,
generalized leadership programs aren't going to cut it. And I would suggest that they look at, have I got structure in place with my team? So have I got my sales team meetings in place? Have I got my one-on-ones in place? And have I got set agendas for that? Am I moving it around so that anyone could run the sales team
mm,
meeting? Am I conducting pipeline as an enablement tool, or am I using it as a blunt instrument to bang my people over their head with? And then am I, like we've talked about, am I getting out in field enough
yeah,
with my salespeople so that I'm not only building our relationship together, built on deeper levels of trust, but I also get a sense of what the market's saying so that from my position, I can advocate, up and down the business to get what we need in order to support our people to generate the revenue that we need.
love it, love it. Great way to end a fabulous conversation, Ingrid. Been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast.
Oh,
When
same. I've loved it.
when if people want to know more about you and certainly connect with you, learn about more about you, what you do, but also, of course, get a copy of your books, the Sales Revolution. Where's the best place for them to do so?
Well, I think if they went to my website, you
Yep.
can certainly order a copy of the book off that. You can even download the first chapter for free so that you can see whether or not you think that that's something that piques your curiosity. And
Nice.
that's the sales doctor, so thesalesdr.com.au. And yeah, there's lots of resources available on the website too.
Awesome. And if it's okay, I'll put your LinkedIn um, link on the show notes as well. So highly recommend connecting with you. Hey, Ingrid, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. It's been a great conversation.
Darren, thank you so much. I've loved every minute. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.